started. We're just missing Yvette, Kimberly, and Victor. Victor can't make it. Yvette said she had some timing issues and may be able to pop on. And Kimberly, I was hoping could make it. Work days are tough for her. So I think you guys have all seen the survey data. I'm looking forward to discussing that. Victor and Mike chimed in with some thoughts too. But before we get started on that, we had asked John and HQ for some background materials that will still be very instrumental to us. They need some more time. John has some financial data, and John can talk to this in a second as well. But the other information we had asked about other membership groups, about our membership numbers, and about our programming. The thought was that in a short week, because we couldn't get to it all, that it'd be best to farm out that information as we tackle the themes that they're related to and germane to. And I think that makes some sense. But John, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were able to pull together?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and, for anyone who's on the call won't be able to see this per se, but I'm going to share my screen if that's all right, Matt.
Go for it.
If I can find it. Here we go. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
And you see a thing that says SPJ financial considerations?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, good. All right. So what I was able to pull together was Jake was able to share with me a spreadsheet that I could pull off some of our financial data. So it is instructive on other things as well that we're talking about in relation to the strategic direction of the organization. So I'll quickly run through this and can stop for questions, but it could inform as we talk about the 5 themes and so on and so forth, some of those considerations. So one of the things you asked for was sort of a glimpse into how our finances have looked in the last 10 years. I would tell you that the last 5 years might be a better study because over time, changing systems, changing ways we code things like that can make the data look a little funkier than it ought to. But 5 years can give us maybe a more apples to apples comparison as we look at that. Overall, our revenue is down 9% over the last 5 years, but in the same time, expenses have increased 31%. So something for us to definitely consider and think about. Our biggest sources of revenue as an organization probably have not changed over time because we're a not-for-profit membership organization, and it tends to be similar in how we take in revenue. Membership, but if you look here on the screen, I've got how it's changed from the last year to 5 years ago, so a 5-year span. Membership is our number one driver, but it's gone down 23% over 5 years. Awards is our second highest, and it's gone down 22%. Convention registration and convention sponsorship are both big drivers of our revenue, and those have both increased. Sponsorship, I can't tell you why it says it's increased 139%. It could be we've coded things or changed how we classify the revenue for that line, but the short answer is it's gone up. Association management is when we take on other clients like JAWS or ASNE. That is a big revenue for us, but it's gone down as well, 27%. Ad revenue, things that end up on our website, perhaps in our quill, as well as in some convention-related ad revenue is a big driver. It's gone down 19%. And then lease management is us renting out our office space, and that's gone down 11%. So all the sources of revenue, except for convention-related ones, have gone down. The good news on that is in the next screen I share, I highlighted almost all of these sources of revenue with strategic thinking can be increased. None of these are things that can't be influenced, right? So membership, awards, convention, how we relate to other associations, ad revenue. So none of it should be anything that we can't look at and say we could find levers to pull that would help influence and change the course and direction that we're on. So if you look at a pie chart of our revenue in any given year, this is generally how it's going to shake out. Membership is roughly about a third, a bit more of a third of our revenue. convention sponsorships. Sometimes those could be dovetailed together because most of our sponsorships are connected to convention, which would be about another third if you put those together. And then awards would follow shortly thereafter with about 19 to 20% of our revenue. And then we have those other few items: lease, association management, and ad revenue. So for what it's worth, and I don't know if this helps you think strategically and think about our plan, but we, can operate or consider that if we want to be financially solvent, this is currently how we're structured to be that way. So how membership goes is sort of right now how our budget looks, as same as convention and awards. As I examined it, I want to lay out a few points here for you to consider. Awards revenue is down 22%, as I shared. The biggest driver of that is the SDX awards fees, which was down 45,000 when you compare to when it was at its peak in 13-14. MOE has actually gone up a bit. So the SDX awards, we need to think about that. Association management revenue was cut in half from 2018-19, a loss of $70,000 in 1 year's time. So the severing of some relationships we had from association work did catch us off quite a bit in our revenue for this last year. So I only say that as that's something that, again, if we brought back to life could, or in more of a case, it could increase back to where we were even just a year ago. Something to think about as we consider membership in terms of revenue. 3 of 7 membership categories, so household, lifetime, and associate membership, yield less than $10,000 combined. So if you put all those revenue streams together, it's less than $10,000 in a over $1 million budget. So think about that as something to consider. If an answer in our minds might be we need more membership categories, this might tell you that, that necessarily won't influence our revenue lines anymore unless we think there's another strategic advantage to that. Professional dues, as far as dues income, peaked in 2012. If we want to get back to where we were in 2012, it would mean we'd have to increase our membership rolls by 1,080 professional members. So that's how far off we've gotten in that time since 2012. So another consideration, not to be doom and gloom about it, but another consideration that how hard the effort might be to get us back to where we were. Perhaps it's not that hard. And then registration fees and the expo for convention have been steady. So the fees we get in for those and might have the most immediate potential for revenue growth. So those are things that even we're working on right now and we could see a big increase this year. It could, year in, year out, that could be something we work with and push towards. Any questions? I have some more I want to share a little bit about membership fees, but is there any questions about any of that before I dive into that?
John,
or I can just push forward and.
one quick question. I didn't see anything on the pie chart about any grants or fundraising. Is there any sliver at all of that in there? If not, that's definitely an area I think where we could help with revenues. It's going out and finding some grants and revenue streams that we haven't before.
That's a good question, Mike. Let me look into that. One of the reasons I don't feel it, I think it doesn't show up in this, Jake and I talked, is not that long ago, the SPJ Foundation would give a real sizable amount of money to SPJ, and that made that line look really large as far as income stream. But then we changed things in how we budget, whereas the foundation took on more of the expenses and then gave us less in how we budgeted that work. So we get less in grants from the SPJ Foundation. So it made the grants line take a nosedive that was not really explained properly by putting it into a chart or a graph like this. It didn't really influence, because then we also shared in some of the expenses they weren't sharing in before. Let me look at that, though. I think the sponsorships number does take in some of that as well, but let me investigate that some more. As we look at membership, this is our professional membership revenue, which could also indicate, could be another way to look at our decline in membership as well. From what I was told, in 2012, there was a dues increase passed of $3. So otherwise, so before then it was $72. After that's been $75. It hasn't changed. So, but you'll note that, obviously the trend line is moving downward, which is something that this group and the board and everybody needs to think about. If you look at three of our other membership categories, so postgraduate, retired, and student, where we get a decent amount of revenue off of these three, they're all somewhat in the same boat, except retired is bumped just a tad, which could show that, is a good thing, but also could show that, we have some, an aging membership as well that could fall more into that retired category. But the student membership, I mean, that's something that this group we ought to think about. Our numbers, and I will pull those to give you more of a detail, like number of members, but those have also obviously correlating with this line have dropped, and that seems to be a place we could find some wins again, is to get back onto college campuses and work with those student members.
That's a pretty troubling trend line. It's fallen in half since 2014.
Yeah. Yep. So, and you guys have been here longer than me, so you might have be able to dissect some reasons as to why, but it's certainly, that's alarming. But I think there's some positivity, and only in that I feel that it's a market we're still able to access, and we just need to figure out the right messages and ways to get there. This last one is three of our lower funding membership categories. As I said, these three all total less than $10,000 if you put them together. Associate member, there was a shift made several years ago to make that just a $20 fee. So obviously the revenue isn't really that sizable, but also it's been going down. Lifetime member kind of pops and jumps all around. Can't really explain why exactly, other than, it might be some years we may have more of a campaign for that than others. And then professional household has grown, but again, it's not a real strong revenue driver for the organization.
How many associate members is that? For about 4
I can look that up while we're on the call. I have that in a different chart. And then just to give you what the biggest expenditures are for an organization like, and this is not atypical of an organization like ours, salaries covers most of a big chunk of our expenditures for non-for-profits. Events, meals, and banquets, so that would be things related to convention. And I can't tell you why it shows here that that's increased over 200%. It probably is, again, how we coded or classified things. But it's just note that it's an expenditure. We also get revenue from that, so kind of some in, some out. Legal fees have increased quite a bit, and that's maybe in a more recent time frame, because we've had to lean on our legal counsel for several things. It also explains LDF and how we've applied and paid out those grants falls into that as well, and I believe we've done a little bit more on that in the last few years, which is part of the reason why it's a bigger expenditure now. Board expenses are up there, health insurance for staff, and then outside services, which I believe, I apologize, I'm still learning this stuff as well. I believe that covers some of the convention as well, some of the vendors we use for convention. But for what it's worth, I didn't know, these are our expenses we're always going to carry. I think one of the things I would encourage us to take away is that we have a better opportunity to drive more revenue than we do to cut expenses. I feel like as I look at the budget and examine the budget, there are things that I, as executive director and staff, will work on to lower expenses and to make sure that we are being as diligent as possible on that. But to make the real big difference, to get us back to a place of where we want to be, it's going to be about how do we increase revenue. And that is, obviously, as I shared before, there's lots of opportunities for that. So that's the quick glance at it. I'd be glad to take any more questions, or if you guys want to, just engage in discussion on this, or wherever Matt wants to take it from here.
Yeah, let's talk about this before we turn to the 5 themes, because I think this will really inform those 5 themes. And I just want to say off the top, thanks, John. This is a pretty good kind of top level look at the organization. It might even be better than any we've had in a long time. And I do think that it shows some areas that may, when we turn to the 5 themes, dovetail nicely with those, such as, convention and sponsorships, and membership and awards, right? That's what people want, is training, recognition, and a place to network. So I think there's a great value to seeing these numbers and how they're going to ripple through the organization. Who wants to jump in on this data?
I have a couple little things. This is Mike. First of all, great. I love my charts. So, this was a great, we could have used this a year ago. Wow. Really nice. A couple things about the drop in student members. A lot of that traces back to lazy advisors. And I say that as a former advisor. We have to motivate the advisors to get out and recruit kids and get them in there, and then also keep them once they graduate. The board expenses should drop with a smaller board. And that 3% doesn't trouble me too much. The legal fees do, the 168% there. That's a lot of dinero there, because those lawyers charge a high rate. So I think we need to look at where are we spending that money. And do they need to be at every board meeting? Do they need to be at every, are there places where we can cut there and just use them either more efficiently or a little bit less? In the spike in membership chart too, the membership chart I was looking at, it looked like my heart monitor this morning. And it spiked in 2017. And I remember Crystal O'Keefe and Tara Puckey did some really innovative, interesting things with membership then. Maybe we should go back and revisit that and see what they were doing. And possibly, because they changed the tide there. 5 years we were dropping in membership, but they shifted things a little bit for that 1 year and a half period. So we're I think revisiting that. Yeah, 2016 to 17. You can see they really made some changes there, and a lot of that was Crystal, but Tara had a hand in it too, I remember.
One point I'd like to add on to Mike's statement about the advisors is I do agree with that. In my work with youth organizations over time, if you have a good advisor, your student organization is rocking and rolling. If they leave, it could be like a 1 year drop off and they're gone. I mean, it's that important to have good, strong advising. And so a strategic direction for the organization might be to think about how do we make that role so desirable and so positive for someone that they can't say no to it, and they love it and they want to invest in it, and how do we make advisors the most cared for individuals, part of our family, that kind of a thing. And if we want the college program to succeed, we do have to think about that.
Real quick, I know this is designed for the task force, but we do have a longtime student advisor here in Sue. Sue, do you want to take a second or two?
Yeah, and John, I think I mentioned this when we met with Andy. It's as much a part, Mike, I agree with you with the advisors, but it's much bigger than that. It is universities who no longer see relevancy in SPJ. I have seen that increasingly, where they have opted, where they used to have active SPJ chapters, and I can tell you in the Washington region, that rings very loud and clear at American University and GW. At AU, ONA basically bumped off SPJ. Advisors, Mike, I don't know if this has been your experience, but when I did a survey a number of years ago of a lot of the universities when I was just an advisor at large on the board, advisors who are on a tenure track are often assigned the role of advisor. They get no credit for it. They don't get extra consideration for time. And it is just not a priority. They want the university to pay their dues, and they don't even do that. As a result, a lot of advisors aren't even SPJ members. I would be more than happy to provide any additional insight, but this is the reality of our situation. It is really, it's a big piece to bite off, but I believe in it. I'm sorry, my dog wants to talk. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, but I have been down this road many times.
Thanks, Sue, for that insight. Appreciate it. And Jennifer just chimed in the chat box with one potential reason for the bump in membership in 2017. She says it could have been because of the Trump bump. There was a membership drive, and a lot of people obviously were worked up and joined and rejoined. So she says that's where the SPJ got a lot of its associate members as well.
But Crystal and Tara were doing some interesting things too. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, J Schools saw a Trump bump as well as in 2017. But they were also doing some interesting things. I mean, I think we should go back and take a look at some of what they were doing. When I taught at ASU, I volunteered to do the chapter. There were $40 in ASU's SPJ account. they just didn't care about it anymore. In some of the bigger J schools, that's happened at, unfortunately.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Patty?
Yeah, so, hi, I'll go.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Patty.
Thank you. So, first of all, thank you, John. Yeah, I can't believe we haven't seen these figures before, but kind of speaks to our lack of leadership in the last year or so. And so it's great to see all of this and really get a sense of what's driving revenue, what's driving expenses. I would just respond to a couple of lines here. I think there's some upside, or there's some growth potential in all of our categories of revenue. The sponsorship category in particular, that's one that I think we should really work hard this year in this year, where we have the assistance of Holly Rose and the Salesforce team to sell the convention. I don't think in the past we've put enough individual attention into how we can get sponsors through that relationship. We've just kind of let her handle everything. And I think that we should be more specific in driving what we want her to do for us, to bring in dollars for the convention that come to us and potentially are not shared, could be shared with our partner. But that's just one category. Membership being a third of our total revenue, if we can move the needle there, we can make a big difference on our stabilizing our revenue, or at least stemming the decline. Awards, good to see we have a strong MOE season underway, and but of course, as John noted, SDX is the bigger revenue producer there, and that's a sticky wicket because we're up against some pretty substantial contests from other groups, so looking at that contest and what we charge people would be helpful. So that's all I want to say on that side. On the expense side, a couple of things. The salary line is the salary line. The same with health insurance. Not much you can do about those. I think board expenses will flatten out, if not decline, as Mike noted. But the events and banquets, I think that we can control that a bit more by finding more sponsors and underwriters for our big events, so that we don't have to carry the full burden. I know SDX dinner, for example, is quite a bit per plate. And even though we are all paying for that, it does not cover all of our expenses. So finding, underwriters for that big event would be terrific. On the legal front, I don't know if we saw, that's a 5-year figure, right, John?
5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so, we did have some extraordinary one-time additional legal expenses with a couple of our personnel issues, which I'm not going to go into on this call, but that added some one-time fees in the last 2 years. Beyond that, I think we increased our overall retainer for Mark Balin's firm last year. And so I don't know if those numbers capture that increase in the retainer. But if we're going to go after that as an area to trim, we'd need to, drill down a bit more and see how those dollars are being spent. So that's all I'll say on that. And I'll just end with a question. John, you said that you see more potential for increasing revenue versus trying to cut expenses. And do you see that, where do you see mostly our potential gains being, which categories?
I think, if you go, it seems to me that if we can really amplify the awards and the convention as good revenue drivers for us and figure out ways to, I want to see our membership increase for more reasons than just revenue. And I think that that's going to be something that this committee is going to have to come up with some thoughts around, things we haven't thought of before. But to me, the easier wins in the short term anyway is to work towards revenue increases by putting on really good events and meetings and really diving into what can make our awards process the envy of the industry, so we get more of that too. So those, I guess, would be the ones I'd say. Obviously, membership is important. To Matt's point, we had 152, or we may have 152 at this point, Matt, associate members.
Okay.
And those are about $20 each, right? So,
Right.
we could double that number and we're still not going to see a big revenue gain, although it's not a bad thing to have more members. So there's other reasons beyond revenue. So, and I don't see us increasing dues, right? Or probably something that the board has talked about. And that's always a tough decision.
Yeah, I don't think there's an appetite for.
Okay, that's a
increasing-
non-starter.
Yeah, we took that up last year and it was soundly defeated. So yeah, so membership is a slower growth proposition and awards and convention. I think this year convention will do well, given that we're in DC in an election year and it's a big population center. So that should help. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for the follow-up on that number, John. How about April, Kimberly, Taylor, or Jennifer? You guys want to talk about this?
Yeah, this is April. I don't really have much more to add beyond what other people have said, but the membership numbers, again, for me were pretty striking. And again, as John said, there are a lot more reasons beyond raising money to want to increase the memberships. The more members we have, the more they'll come to our convention, or they'll increase, we can expand the reach of our programs that are year round. So I'm definitely interested in looking for ways that we can add more students and journalists who are in their first or second jobs. So it's just nice to see the numbers, because I've kind of heard it anecdotally about how our membership has dropped, but it's pretty stark to see the actual charts and to see the areas where we've fallen the most.
Thank you. Kimberly, Taylor, or Jennifer?
Yeah, this is Taylor. I agree with everything that April just said. I think that it's cool that we're having this task force, because I think that will just naturally, once we focus up what our priorities are, I think that will drive more members, because I think part of the issues that we might not have members is just people are losing the focus of SPJ and finding, they don't have the tangible benefits in a lot of ways, or they don't know that they have them. So I'm hopeful that these discussions will impact that, just by having people know what we're all about a little bit more. And so yeah, thank you for showing those numbers to us.
Let me add too on that point real quick. Sorry. One of the things you wanted us to do is sort of investigate where other organizations are at, and that's going to take a little time to figure that out. A lot of people aren't transparent about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we find a good number of our peer organizations are seeing that same thing about membership. It's sort of a societal trend too that we're fighting against, as far as people joining on to associations, especially if they have to foot the bill themselves and it's not an employer sponsored thing. So that's something we just have to consider as well as we discuss membership.
Kimberly?
Hi, this is Kimberly. Yeah, I wanted to agree on all of the points that were mentioned, and also say that I do see membership as being, that I listed that as my number one. And I also see programming as being hand in hand with that. I'm a member of a couple of other organizations, and I've seen that through good training programs, through good networking opportunities, that's actually brought more interest to the organization. So both membership and programming and awards, et cetera, that to me, I think should be a focus. So.
Yeah. Jennifer,
Can you hear me?
Is that you, Jennifer?
Yeah, hi. My internet connection is a little iffy right now, so I don't know if you can hear me. I can only hear bits and pieces, but to Mike's point, I do recall some things that Tara and Crystal were doing as far as direct communication with members. There was like a with chapter leaders and things. There was like a chapter newsletter that went out every month. Tara was always giving me stuff to proofread and edit to send out, that she was going to send out to leaders and chapters. And so I do think there is room to add some of that stuff back in. And I do think it is missed. So, you know, the communications team is happy to help with any of that any way we can.
I have a
Great.
question. Is there, with chapters, I've noticed that just from some chapters that I've been a part of in the past, there doesn't seem like whenever a chapter hosts an event or a program that people who are SPJ members can come to, there's not really, they don't tend to enforce being a member of SPJ, like you can come to this event if you're a member of SPJ. So they're more focused on the turnout of the event. And so I'm wondering, if there was more emphasis on requiring chapters to really make sure that everybody in the chapter that comes to the events is a member of SPJ, which I know is a difficult thing to ask, but we might be able to drive our membership more. I don't know if anyone else has had experience with that.
Yeah, that's as a longtime member of a local chapter, that's always the trick, right? Is balancing how you get turnout with how you push membership. I'll say making it a requirement might be tricky, but I do think there's some more support that HQ and National could do to, you know, give them printable ethics codes or flyers that they can then, you know, a business card that says, here's how you become a member. And then, of course, our membership site needs to be a little bit better. But I think those are all important issues that this discussion will help inform. Why don't we switch over now in the last half of the call to those themes. Thank you all for dropping them in there. I think, let me see if there's a way I can just get this on my screen so that we can all look at it collectively.
Matt, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, this is Yvette.
Yvette, sorry, I didn't realize you joined us.
Oh yeah, I've been here for a while.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the data that John shared before we move on?
Well, so I did get in here a little late because of a work thing. Sorry about that. I wondered if was anything sent? Are we going to be able to get those? Because I probably missed maybe half of that. So is there a chart or anything that's going to be?
Yeah, John, do you want to send those around to the group when we're done with the call?
Yeah.
Or?
Yep, certainly can.
Yeah. For
Okay,
sure.
great. And so I was just going to say that, I mean, especially toward the last part of the conversation about, you know, and I know we're going to move on to the themes, you know, so much of it is tied in to each other. Like when we say membership, there's so many pieces of it. And so just when April was talking about like events, the one thing I thought about was two things. I see that other organizations seem, and maybe seem is the correct word here, operating word here, seem to have more smaller regional events and talk about it a lot more. It seems like I'm seeing that. And then also when our regions do have events, I'm not hearing about it, even though I'm not in that region. So I wonder if there's some way we can give them support to really highlight and identify all these things that are happening for a couple of reasons. Membership, yes, but we're relevant, you know, and I think that when people are not seeing what we're hearing, what we're doing, that's a problem. And I don't know if if National can give these chapters some support in that way to send out, you know, maybe even on, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, but in a more regular way. I know in the past we've had a place on the website where you could see things that are coming up even on the chapter level, but even pushing more information out for people who may be near a region and might want to go see something. But again, it's not just that. I think it's to show, yeah, we are actually active. We are doing things. You know, we're not old as dust. Maybe we are, but we're still relevant. So, you know, membership, but yes, also, you know, giving chapters support so that we can help them promote themselves a little bit more. And I know we can't do everything for them. You know, I mean, we need, you know, but maybe we do need treasurer training. You know, usually in a chapter, it's the treasurer that's always bugging people about getting their dues in. You know, maybe we need some training of the different, you know, certainly treasurer, but maybe other officer levels too. again, I don't want to look like Big Brother and saying that we know better than you, but in the line of support, I think maybe could help, and also just show not only chapters but other people that yes, we're doing things.
Those are all points well taken. And I do think you're right that a lot of those, there's some overlap, and that's what we'll see when we discuss these 5 themes. You can see my kind of best intentioned attempt at kind of ranking these. Obviously, we all didn't use the same terms, so but I think there was a lot of focus. Advocacy rose to the top, training rose to the top, obviously ethics, membership, super key, and then finances, and then as you'll see here, there were some kind of ones that I wasn't really sure. I didn't want to lump them in with more of the broader subjects. Victor and Mike both talked about innovation. There was some mentions of media literacy, employment and business opportunities. John had mentioned a focus on organizational structure. But it seemed to me that a lot of them kind of fell under the rubrics of membership growth, education and training, advocacy and ethics, diversity, which includes younger members, and then financial growth and stability. So why don't we start the discussion here? And I'm hoping before we get off the call that we can have some agreement or consensus on what these 5 broad themes will be, and then at the next call we can tackle the first one and go even more granular to the extent that John had laid out, where we try to propose some ways to bolster these. As you saw from John's presentation just now, there are clearly some big ways where we can have some growth in the contest, with the conference, and then more generally membership. And I think the idea there is not that we want to just grow membership. We want to give people reasons to join so that they will want to be members. Who wants to jump in first? Mike is saying in the chat box that he would clump advocacy, lobbying, ethics, and FOI together, and that would give us the big 3 of number 1, advocacy, lobbying, ethics, FOI, 2, membership, 3, education, training. My thought was the reason why I think we might be better served to separate them is I wonder about lobbying and advocacy, and whether we want to. This is kind of the push that you heard from Dave Collier, right? Where he thinks that advocacy and a lobbyist and lobbying, either at the federal or state level, should be a really big focus. Obviously, he's not on this task force, but as a former president, I think his ideas, really rose to the fore for me, which is why I thought advocacy and ethics, maybe we do kind of clump them together. I also think one other quick point before I let Mike elaborate or anyone else weigh in. I do think we should give some thought to how we order these 1 through 5. I do think there's a inherent belief that number 1 is more important than number 5. And I also think that the reason why I numbered those as I did is based on the group's input, which again, you can see from this kind of good faith effort on clumping these together.
One question for me would be the diversity and youth and the membership growth and how those things collate or kind of connect with each other. So within membership growth, we obviously want to see more youth members, I assume, or collegiate, or and so in its own, as a diversity and youth component, what kinds of things are we thinking about for that?
Well, I'd like to point out the diversity. Yeah, definitely youth is part of it, but I still think we're also thinking about gender and racial diversity too.
And I see that I see that as a subcategory of membership growth as we think about our overall membership growth strategy part of it should be looking at the collegiate, part should look at diversity, however we define that. And part of it is the categories of membership. There's a lot of different ways to look at that, but those two seem like a subset of membership to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Yvette? I know you had put diversity as one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of diversity dimensions that we can explore here, and it does all fall under membership. Now, I could also make the argument that when we're talking about our programming, when we're talking about, you know, other things too, we should also keep diversity in mind. That's very important.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to echo on Yvette's point, I was debating on whether to do chapter support or diversity as one of my 5. And the thinking was diversity is important no matter what we're doing. And so we should just look for ways within the other big categories to make sure that we're broadening as much as possible the number of people and programs that we're offering and reaching out to.
I think we could see kind of a tree, because I agree chapter support's really important, and in my mind, that might fall under communication, because I think I had communication / promotion as pretty high up there, and in my mind maybe that's fell under. So I could see us having kind of like this tree from our 5 themes, and then the things that come underneath it, and then maybe we decide how to tackle things. Because yes, there's, you know, I think diversity certainly is important, but I certainly wouldn't say that chapter support is not. So I definitely don't want to say, well, you know, you can only have one thing over the other, because obviously we can't do that. But I do think that we can find ways for them, you know, kind of nicely to fall under these categories.
Yeah, I see some wisdom to that too. I also think maybe it's more powerful to have diversity kind of ripple through all or many of our 5 themes to show that that's a value that we share. If we got rid of diversity and youth, then maybe it makes sense, as some people have said, to include like chapter support, communications, and make that a separate thing. What do you guys think?
I actually think that's a really critical thing to be thinking about. At first, I was going to say chapter support really is a membership strategy, but membership to me is seeking new members mostly, right? As opposed to keeping current members happy. And I see, going back to something that somebody just brought up a second ago, you know, letting the entire world know the programming that we're doing across the country. That's been a real challenge for us, despite the explosion of social media, despite the fact that all of our chapters, almost without exception, have a Facebook page, an active Twitter account, other ways that they're reaching their members. They have websites, they do email blasts, etc. So I think there's a lot of communication you get from your region or your state or your chapter. But I don't think that national, I think us on the board, we're not paying enough attention to it, or it's not trickling up, right? And so, you know, we're actually not a boring group that doesn't do any good programming, right? We do a lot of really interesting programming. It happens, yeah, at the national, but it happens all throughout the country at the chapter level. And we read about it every year in their chapter reports. And then sometimes we talk about it, but, you know, this is something that I think we can do better on. And is that a chapter relations kind of position at headquarters? Because it's not just a membership thing, right? It's taking what we're already doing and telling everybody else about it, letting chapters know about each other's successes and cool things, and using that as a way, using that narrative as a way to drive new memberships by bragging about what current members are doing. So yeah, I like the chapter support. Think about that as its own category.
Well, I totally agree with that. And one easy way is to encourage them to always put us in their social media. But I must tell you, unless I don't know where it is, this is Yvette, that our Twitter account is at SPJ pick. And is that right?
SPJ
And
underscore
when
tweets. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, is there also a pick?
Pick?
Because a lot of times what will come up is, in the past when I've done this, what will come up is something that I didn't feel like was relevant, like I wouldn't want to use it. Can we not just do at SPJ? Is that taken?
Mm.
It is taken.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah, and we've tried to get the person to turn it loose and they won't. I mean, we haven't tried in the last couple of years. We could try again, but yeah. But yeah,
Okay.
Twitter's SPJ underscore tweets, and then Instagram is SPJ underscore pics.
Maybe that's what I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we should make it as easy as possible for local, regional folks to include us in the tweet, because we'll see that.
Right.
But if they're not doing that, and they're not doing it, then we don't really know what's going on, and then we can retweet what they have and show all this great stuff that's going on. Before I stop, let me just really quickly to say yes, I agree, Matt, when you're talking about making sure we have diversity run all the way through, but there's a little danger in that. I almost feel like you have to do two things. I still think diversity is important enough to have its own category. And yes, you definitely are correct in saying that there should be elements of diversity through everything. But I feel like if you get rid of the larger overall theme, there can be a diminishing factor there. Just a suggestion.
If diversity was its own thing again, which of these 5 would you get rid of? Can you see the screen, or are you on the phone?
No, I'm on the phone.
So right now the 5 are, in no particular order: membership growth, education and training; 2, 3, advocacy, lobbying, ethics, and FOIA; 4, chapter support and communications; 5, financial growth and stability.
I know when we first said we were going to do this, this was a good way to set it up, but can we not have 6? If
no
we
magic
find
number.
that and that's what I'm saying, there's no magic number. So I wouldn't want to get rid of anything.
Yeah. How do others feel? Who hasn't jumped in? John, what do you think?
I mean, to Yvette's point, I think 5 was just sort of the number that, it's one of those numbers you think about when you're organizing things, but 6 is certainly fine to have if we feel like it's important enough. I feel like these 5 you have currently, and maybe adding diversity as well. I mean, from what I understand right now, and I'm still new to the organization, if you were to go to the average SPJ member and say, these are the 5 or 6 things we're working on, they would be like, heck yes. I mean, these resonate to me as the key things, right? So.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to pair to 5, we could put chapter support under membership and take the word growth off of that. And then it just becomes membership and current chapter initiatives, communicating, blah, blah, would fall under membership, enhancing membership, however we communicate that.
Yeah, it would be like retention and growth. And retention, I would think would be chapter support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add that the way I see membership is being both attracting new members as well as retaining it. And in that way, I'm looking at it through the lens of sparking engagement. And that could also help in terms of supporting our advocacy efforts, for instance, where you'll get more buy-in from members and more support from them.
That's a really good point, that we shouldn't just look at it as growth, it's recruitment and retention, right? I think that's an insightful point. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of 5. I just think it's more manageable for people to get their arms around. And I do think diversity should be its own. I'm with you there, Yvette. membership is kind of becoming bulky, but we have, 3 or 4 areas to focus on. So in each of these, so maybe that we're already getting ahead of our first homework assignment. Well done, you guys.
Thank you, teacher.
How about these other ones? How about, what are we missing that we want to include in the 5, if anything?
One thing I was thinking about is we have several committees, and the committees are working on lots of things, and some of the things they get direction from national, but some I think they just work on their own. Should we be thinking about how to use the committees that we have, and because look at what we have. Obviously, we have education, we have ethics, and should we take a tip from the committees that we have in those areas to make sure that that's included somehow in here? And are we thinking about maybe how to utilize the committees to help us begin to work on these?
Right. So that gets at a topic that I think kind of crosses it doesn't need its own category because it's a pan category topic, which is the structure of SPJ and the many different branches off the main trunk, right? One of them's committees, one of them's communities, et cetera. And so, I think as we look at things like membership, there'll be a committee question there, perhaps, right? What's the goal of the membership committee versus our headquarters staff membership work? Under education and training, which of our committees are working in service to our training goals? Should maybe some of our committees be shuttered and replaced with other ones? So that is a very good thing to think about, is our committees, our other pieces of the working SPJ globe, where do they fit in under each of these? Not that we have to try to fix everything at once, but in some of these topics, looking at what we're doing at the chapter level or the committee level or even the board level, how are they enhancing these various priorities or holding them back, getting in the way, etc.
So do you think, Patty, that folds in under membership or somewhere else? Like right now, we could say chapter and committee support, communications and engagement. I do think that one of the things we should not lose track of is Victor's kind of guiding principle that we want to be the sharpest knife and not the Swiss Army knife. And so I definitely think we need to pare some things back. And committees, community, like we have a lot of things that I think are confusing to people, even if they're great places to turn.
Well, I don't know where that falls, Matt, but at some point, either in this first round as we head to April, or at some point in the coming months, we do need to decide what we can take off the SPJ organizational chart, right? That is just not being done or done well, that we want to cede to other people. So I'm not sure how we get at that big question, but yeah.
And that's maybe best a question for another day. It's a smidge off topic here. Taylor has chimed in the chat box to say that innovation does make sense under education and training. Anyone else have a thought on that point?
Well, related, I would say one of the things we've talked about in recent months is the prospect of some additional online opportunities for people, so that folks who can't make their way to a conference can otherwise get SPJ branded training. And some of that exists in other places. Maybe we just become a repository for where all those great web available tools exist. Some of them are buried in our website, many pages in. So that's an innovation/training consideration.
And to Mike's point about education, innovation being more than just a part of education, I think you're right. I think this is like diversity. It should kind of fall to a certain extent in everything that we do, you know? Anyone else who hasn't chimed in want to give some thought? In terms of ordering, I do think if we're trying to rebrand or re-strategize SPJ, I mean, everyone thinks of us as the education place, but every journalism group is an education and training place. So I do think I would put membership first. That's clear consensus of the group. But I would suggest that advocacy, lobbying, ethics, and FOI be 2, and that education and training maybe go down the list to 3. That we swap those 2 essentially.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter what order these are in. These are the 5 topics we're going to look at for the first iteration of our plan.
Okay. Anyone else? Hearing nothing. We're creeping up at 1 o'clock. I think we made a really good start here with these 5. And we've even started to kind of go under with that second layer. John, why don't you send out the sheet, the document that you had created in terms of next steps? And then maybe could you also send out again your one sheet that lets us know kind of what we need to do under these 5 groups? We've already started doing that in 1 and 2, but I think that'll help us for the next meeting. At which I think
prepared to the next meeting with more data on membership exclusively. So we can maybe handle that with each topic. We can get into deeper sets of data around things that could help us make good decisions, including maybe chapter data as well, which I wasn't really reflected in this last set of slides.
That'd be helpful too, to know how many members are in some of these chapters, especially the bigger ones. Anyone on the call have requests for John under the membership umbrella that we'd want to revisit when we next meet? Okay. Yeah, why don't you pull that together what you can? I mean, if it's anything approaching the document today, it'll be a really big help. And so I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, you guys, thank you very much for your heavy lifting on this and leading up to this call. This was super helpful. And so next we meet in 2 weeks on, what is that? There's a leap year. It's a leap year, so I get confused.
But Matt, remind us, we were going to take each of these topics for each meeting and in advance put some meat on the bones. Is that the
that's
idea?
what John is going to send out.
Okay.
Is our next steps and what we will actually be doing on that next call. It's essentially going one step deeper, as we already started to do with membership, and to say, okay, what does that mean? Membership's our theme. We want to bolster our diversity, increase youth membership, revisit our 7 categories, 3 of which only bring in $10,000, and figure out and maybe a way to get chapter and committee communication improved. And so I think in 2 weeks, once John sends out that chart, we can kind of ping it back and forth via email, and maybe there's a way that we can do, again, some of the heavy lifting before we get on the call, which really speeds things along.
Yeah. Great.
And I don't have my calendar in front of me, but how many more meetings do we have before our go date, which was April 1st? I think there might only be 3 or 4, so I might need to double up subjects in some of these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, potentially. But, one of the things too is that I assume if we get into really good discussions that need more time, I bet you guys are on the board. But April is a good deadline, but doesn't have to be, right? Like it could, if it has to stretch.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's always the possibility of weekly meetings, as we had discussed, as we get closer to. But why don't we next in 2 Fridays tackle membership and see how that goes. And then I think we'll know, having done 1, whether we can tackle 2 in an hour.
This is Yvette. Do we feel confident enough or ready enough to perhaps ask the membership committee to bring in any ideas? I mean, we know what they think. In many ways, they've given us some ideas, but do we feel like we want to do that or not yet?
That's a good question for the group. I mean, we could easily ask Colin to join us on that call. What do others think?
I would be against that right now. Not at all personally against any ideas that the membership committee is suggesting, but I think it's better for us to look at what they're doing and kind of consider whether those are the right strategies to move forward any of the membership goals that we would be articulating.
All right. I wonder if it would be transparent when we've had issues with that before. And Sue and Lauren have sat in on a couple of these. I wonder if there's a value to him being, even in 3 minutes, to just explain to the group what our approach has been to membership, because I'm not even sure exactly. I know some of his kind of ambitions going forward. Maybe he could just give us a top level discussion.
Yeah, I was going to say that one thing that we can do is allot some time at the beginning of our call to have him talk about it, and then at some point ask him to leave, and then we can discuss all the other topics.
That seems like a
jump in.
diplomatic
I'm the board liaison. This is Mike. I'm the board liaison to Colin and the membership committee. I think if we're going to have other non-committee members sitting in on this, he can come in for a few minutes. He's cool. He's not going to, disrupt the meeting or anything. Lay a few things out and then say, Colin, you can hang around with you if you like. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff you probably don't care about now. You jump on if you want, on if stay on if you like, but it's up to you. We had somebody on here take us all to task last meeting about making sure the meetings were open. Is now saying we should wait to bring Colin in, and I think that's very hypocritical. So I think we should include him, and we talk about being open and transparent and being inclusive and not springing things on our members. Let's make sure our membership person is in the loop. Better on buy-in.
Yeah, I think it's a nice gesture, and as chair, I'm inclined to invite him in. Does anyone feel strongly otherwise? I'll entertain more discussion if so.
No, it's fine. I'm not against the openness, Mike, at all. I'm just thinking, Colin's at the implementation end and we're at the strategy end, but it would not hurt us, of course, to get an overview of what the committee's doing. I'm just getting a whole lot of that right now in my inbox already. So I know what they're doing, but this whole group doesn't know what they're doing. So
and I think that's the value to it, Patty, that people on the call won't know, and it'll be good just to bring people up to speed, even if it's just a few minutes.
Yeah, sounds fine.
Yeah. And then we can do that with the finance committee chair and the diversity chair, FOI chair. I think there's a value to that rather than us. I think we need an understanding of the lay of the land before we change the lay of the land.
Okay.
Lauren is raising her hand. We're about to wrap up, Lauren. So quickly, what would you like to say?
I'll make it quick since somebody accused me of being hypocritical. I just wanted to chime in. I've seen what the membership committee plan is so far, and right now they only have one idea with one effort. So if you're looking for a long list of ideas from the membership committee, they just haven't developed them yet. Colin and any other member of SPJ should be able to join any meeting at any time. But if you're looking for specific content, they don't have it yet.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think it's less about what they have planned going forward and more about what they've done and what they hope, what they think their kind of role is. I do think a few minutes would be helpful. Okay, thank you guys all very much. John, we'll look for those two pieces of information, and then to the extent we can get the ball rolling before we meet again in 2 weeks, that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Guys, have a great weekend.
Same.
Bye.